The rain was hitting the windshield so hard I could barely see the road. It was almost 11 at night when I accepted that ride, the last of the day, I had promised myself. My daughter had called me earlier asking for help with her math homework, and I was driving a stranger around the city while she was probably already asleep, with no answer from her father. Another promise broken. One more on the endless list of failures that had defined my life for the past 3 years. The passenger got into the car slowly, each movement seeming to hurt. He was an elderly man, probably in his early 80s, wearing a suit that likely cost more than I earned in 6 months. The smell of expensive cologne filled my old car. He settled into the back seat with a deep sigh, the kind of sigh that carries the weight of the entire world. "Good evening," I said, trying to sound professional despite the exhaustion consuming me from within. "Shall we go to the address in the app?" He took a few seconds to respond, as if gathering the strength just to speak. "Yes, please." His voice was hoarse, but there was something about it, genuine politeness, the kind you don't see anymore these days. "Sorry for making you go out in this weather." "It's part of the job," I replied, putting the car in motion. The truth was I needed every penny. I had overdue bills piled on the kitchen table, my older son had needed new sneakers for weeks, and my ex-wife was threatening to further reduce the time I spent with the kids if I didn't get the child support payments up to date. How had a man who once had his own company, an office overlooking downtown, and 15 employees fallen so low? I drove in silence for a few minutes, focused on the slippery road. That's when he spoke again. "Do you have children?" The question caught me off guard. Passengers rarely started conversations with me, and when they did, it was usually complaints about traffic or politics. "I have 2, I replied. "A 9-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy." "What a wonderful age," he said, and there was such profound sadness in those words that it made me glance in the rearview mirror. His eyes were fixed on the window, watching the rain. "Enjoy every second. Time passes faster than we realize." Something in his tone touched me. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe it was the fact that I really hadn't enjoyed every second. I was always working, always chasing money that was never enough. "I try," I lied. "But it's hard. I work a lot." "We all use that excuse," he said softly. "I used it for years. I built an empire while my son grew up without me. I thought I was doing the right thing, you know? Securing his future, leaving a legacy. What a cruel joke." I stayed quiet, not knowing what to say. There was a raw pain in his words that made me uncomfortable, but also curious. "Forgive me," he continued. "I don't usually open up to strangers. But maybe that's exactly why I can. You don't know me, have no reason to judge me or pretend compassion." "No need to apologize," I said. "Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone we don't know." He laughed, a dry sound without joy. "Wisdom from experience, I suppose." He paused. "Have you ever lost something you can never get back?" The question echoed inside the car like a gunshot. Images flooded my mind. The day I closed my company, the look of disappointment on my wife's face, the last time I read a story to my daughter before she stopped asking. "Yes," I replied quietly. "I've lost a lot." "Then you understand," he said. "Understand that some mistakes can't be fixed. Some words can never be taken back. Some hugs will never be given." I drove a few more blocks, the silence now heavy between us. The rain began to ease a little. That's when he spoke again, and what he said froze me. "I received the diagnosis today. Terminal cancer. 3 months, maybe 4 if I'm lucky. Although frankly, I'm not sure I want to be lucky." My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. What do you say to someone who has just received a death sentence? I'm sorry." "Don't feel sorry," he replied quickly. "I'm 84 years old. I've lived longer than most. The problem isn't dying, it's dying alone, knowing I wasted every chance to do things differently." I looked in the rearview mirror again, and this time really looked at him. His face was pale under the dim streetlight, deep, glassy eyes. But there was something else there, determination perhaps. As if he had made some important decision. "Your son," I began, unsure if I should ask. "He died 37 years ago," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "He was 22. We fought, a stupid argument about his life choices, about the girlfriend I disapproved of. I said terrible things. He stormed out, furious. 2 hours later, a drunk driver took his life at an intersection 5 blocks from our house. I felt a tightness in my chest. My God. The last words I said to my son were that he was a disappointment, he continued, his voice now almost a whisper. That he was throwing his life away. That I regretted wasting so much money on his education. 37 years later, those words still echo in my head every night before I sleep. I couldn't respond. What he was sharing was so intimate, so devastating, that I felt like I was intruding on a sacred space of pain. You look like him, he said suddenly. Same age he would be now. Same tired eyes of someone carrying the world on their shoulders. Same way of holding the wheel, fingers tense. A shiver ran down my spine. There was something strange in the way he was looking at me in the rearview mirror now, as if he was seeing through me, or seeing someone else. We arrived at the address, an elegant building in the most expensive neighborhood of the city. I parked at the entrance, and he stood still for a moment, not making any move to get out. May I ask your name? He said. James, I replied. He closed his eyes for a second, as if the name caused him physical pain. My son's name was James too. The silence that followed was so dense I could hear it. Finally, he opened the door, but before leaving, he turned to me. Do you still speak to your father, James? The question hit me like a punch. I hadn't spoken to my father in almost 2 years, not since he called me a failure for losing the company, not since he said I had disappointed the whole family. No, I admitted. We don't talk anymore. He nodded slowly, as if he already knew the answer. I understand. Then, to my complete surprise, he took out his wallet and began counting bills. Many bills. What are you doing? I asked, confused. The ride was $23, right? He said. I want to leave a tip. He placed a stack of money on the console between the front seats. When I looked down, my heart nearly stopped. They were $100 bills. Many of them. This has to be a mistake, I stammered. It's not a mistake, he said calmly. It's $30,000. I want you to accept it on one condition. My mind was spinning. $30,000. More money than I had seen together in years. It would pay all my debts, buy what the kids needed, give me time to breathe. What condition? I asked, my voice trembling. He looked me directly in the eyes, and what I saw there scared me. It wasn't madness, but absolute clarity and unwavering purpose. Call your father tomorrow. Apologize for what you need to apologize for. Forgive him for what you need to forgive. Don't let pride and anger steal the time you still have together. Because one day, sooner than you imagine, one of you won't be here, and all that will remain are the words unsaid and the hugs not given. Tears burned my eyes. The words weren't just his. They were my own truths I had been avoiding for so long. Promise, he insisted. I promise, I whispered. He smiled then, a sad but genuine smile. Thank you, James. Thank you for listening on my last night as a free man. Thank you for having my son's eyes and for giving me the chance to do something right before it's too late. He got out of the car with difficulty and walked toward the building. I sat there, staring at the money on the console, feeling as if I had just lived something that would change my life forever. I had no idea how right I was. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the money spread out on the kitchen table, recounting it several times to make sure it was real. $30,000 from a stranger who mistook me for the ghost of his dead son. $30,000 in exchange for a promise I should have kept years ago, without needing money as an incentive. I picked up my phone countless times, opening my father's contact, but never dialing. Pride was still too high a wall to climb. But I had promised. And that man, whose name I didn't even know, had given me more than money. He had given me a mirror to see my own life, my own regrets waiting to happen. Finally, around 3 a.m, I fell asleep with the phone in my hand. I woke up to it ringing at 7:30. It was an unknown number. I answered, my voice still hoarse with sleep. Hello. I'm looking for James Henley, said a female voice, formal and restrained. That's me. Mr. Henley, my name is Rebecca. I'm the executive assistant of Mr. Vernon Coldridge. I need you to come to his lawyer's office today at 10 o'clock. It's extremely urgent. My stomach churned. Vernon Coldridge? Is he the man from last night? There was a pause. Yes. Mr. Coldridge passed away overnight. The world stopped. What? I'm sorry to inform you, but he suffered a heart attack around 2 a.m. He didn't survive. However, he left very specific instructions that you should be contacted immediately. There are documents that need signing and information you need to receive. Can you come? Yes. I'll be there, I managed to say, still in shock. I hung up the phone and stared into space. He had died. That man who spent his last night talking to some random rideshare driver, seeking redemption through a stranger who looked like his lost son. And now I was being called to his lawyer's office. Why? If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened in that office changed everything I thought I knew about luck, destiny, and the weight of promises. The office was on the 42nd floor of a mirrored building in the city's financial district. I had never been in such an intimidating place, the kind of environment where I used to close deals when my company still existed, but now it seemed to belong to another universe. The receptionist guided me down a mahogany-paneled corridor to a conference room with a panoramic view. My hands were sweating inside the pockets of the only dress pants that still fit me. A man of approximately 50 years, with perfectly combed gray hair and gold-framed glasses, stood up as I entered. Mr. Henley, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm Richard Patterson, Mr. Coldridge's personal lawyer for over 20 years. He shook my hand with professional firmness. Please have a seat. I sat in the leather chair that probably cost more than my car. Richard opened a thick folder and took out several documents. I imagine you're confused about this whole situation, he began, studying my face carefully. I must admit, I am as well, to some extent. Mr. Coldridge called me last night at 11:45, shortly after arriving home. He said he had met someone special and needed to make immediate changes to his will. We worked until nearly 2 in the morning to finalize everything. My heart raced. Changes? Involving me. Involving you, yes. Richard took off his glasses and looked me directly in the eye. Mr. Henley, do you have any idea who Vernon Coldridge was? I shook my head. No. He was just a passenger. We talked during the ride, he gave me that money and… Vernon Coldridge was the founder and CEO of Coldridge Industries, Richard interrupted. One of the largest medical technology companies in the country. He developed 3 of the most widely used orthopedic prosthetics in the world. When he retired 5 years ago, his personal fortune was estimated at $89 million. The air left my lungs. 89 million. That man in my old car, with rain leaking through the door seal, was a billionaire. He never remarried after his wife died 15 years ago, Richard continued. He had no other children besides the one he lost in 1988. His only close family was a niece in California he barely spoke to. Vernon was, essentially, a deeply lonely man who channeled his pain into work and philanthropy. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice coming out weaker than intended. Richard picked up a sealed envelope. Because Vernon left very specific instructions. He wanted you to hear something before we discuss the legal details. He placed an old voice recorder on the table and pressed play. Vernon's voice filled the room, clearer than the night before, as if he had found renewed strength. James, if you're hearing this, it means my heart has finally given out. The doctors said it could happen at any moment, the cancer had already spread, and my heart was too weak to withstand treatment. I knew I had little time, maybe days, maybe weeks. But finding you yesterday was no coincidence. It was the answer to a prayer I made 37 years ago. A chill ran down my spine. After my son died, I spent years in therapy, trying to find a way to move forward. My therapist had me write a letter to him, asking for forgiveness, saying everything I never said in life. At the end of that letter I made a promise. If I ever had the chance to help someone in the same situation, a father and son separated by pride and anger, I would do everything in my power to repair that relationship. It would be my way of honoring his memory. Tears began to form in my eyes. When you got in the car yesterday and said your name, when I saw your eyes in the rearview mirror, when you told me about your father, I knew it was my last chance. God, universe, destiny, whatever it may be, had put you in my path so I could fulfill that promise. There was a pause in the recording, the sound of him breathing with difficulty. But then you told me about your children. About how hard you worked, about how you were always rushing. And I saw my son in those words. I saw myself. And I realized something devastating. You are making the exact same mistakes I did. You are losing your children in the same way I lost mine, one day at a time, one broken promise at a time. My throat tightened. He was right. Painfully, brutally right. So I decided to do more than just encourage you to call your father. I decided to give you something no one gave me, a true second chance. Not just words, but time. Real time, free from the financial prison that keeps you away from the people you love. Richard paused the recording and handed me a document. Before we continue, I need you to read this. I took the paper with trembling hands. It was a summary of the will. When I read the first line, I thought I would faint. Vernon Coldridge leaves 80% of his net fortune, totaling approximately $71 million, to James Robert Henley. The room started spinning. This can't be right. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, Richard said firmly. He left 10% to his niece, 5% to charities, and 4% to his longtime staff. The remaining 80% is yours. But why? I'm nobody. I drove him for 20 minutes. Richard pressed play again. I know you must be in shock, James. I know you must think I'm crazy, that this is some cruel trick. But it's not. Let me explain my reasoning, because there are conditions attached to this inheritance. Conditions that may seem strange, perhaps even impossible, but that are essential. Vernon coughed on the recording, a wet, painful sound. First condition, you must reconcile with your father within 30 days of my death. Not just a quick call, but a true reconciliation. Richard has instructions to verify this through independent witnesses. If not fulfilled, 80% of the inheritance goes to charity. My hands gripped the edge of the table. Second condition, you must stop working as a rideshare driver immediately. Your job for the next 2 years will be to be a father. A present, available, engaged father. Your mornings are for taking your children to school. Your afternoons, to help with homework. Your weekends, to create memories they will cherish forever. Richard will hire investigators to confirm you are doing this. Fail, and the inheritance is revoked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Third condition, you must create a foundation in memory of my son. It will be called the James Coldridge Second Chances Foundation. Its mission will be to help small business owners who have failed rebuild their lives and businesses. You will understand their pain, shame, and despair better than anyone. And you will be able to give them what no one gave me when I needed it most, genuine hope. Vernon paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was full of emotion. Fourth and final condition, you must find my granddaughter. My brain froze. Granddaughter. I whispered to the empty room. My son had a girlfriend when he died. Jennifer. I hated her. I thought she was gold digging, leading my son away from the path I planned for him. I was horrible to her. When my son died, she came to the funeral, and I turned her away. I told her she had no right to be there, that it was her fault my son was distracted that night. Vernon's voice broke completely. 3 months later, I received a letter from her. She said she was pregnant. That she would have the baby and raise it alone, because she knew I would never accept it. She wanted nothing from me, no money, no recognition. She just wanted me to know that my son would live on through that child. I tore up the letter, James. Tore it up and threw it away. I told myself she was lying, trying to extort money. I never replied. Never reached out. I spent 37 years pretending that letter never existed. Tears now ran freely down my face. 2 months ago, I hired private detectives. They found Jennifer. She died of cancer 5 years ago, but before she passed, she told everything to her daughter. My granddaughter exists, James. She is 36 years old, lives only 2 hours from here, and has no idea she has a grandfather, who wasted decades out of pride and stupidity. Vernon took a deep breath. Her name is Elizabeth. Elizabeth Coldridge Thompson. The detectives gave me the address, the phone number, everything. But when I held that paper, when I had all the information I needed to finally meet her, I realized something terrible. I didn't deserve it. Not after rejecting her before she was even born. Not after denying my son the chance to be remembered through her. Not after being so cruel to her mother. There was a long silence on the recording. So I decided that you would do it for me. You will find Elizabeth. You will tell her about the grandfather she never knew, about the father who died before knowing she existed. You will give her the letters I wrote but never sent, the photos I kept, the memories I preserved. And you will give her a quarter of the inheritance, $18 million that should have been hers all along. Richard paused the recording again. There's more, he said softly, but I think you need a moment. I couldn't speak. I couldn't process. $71 million. Impossible conditions. A lost granddaughter. A dead man using me as an instrument of posthumous redemption. Why me? I finally managed to ask. Why trust all this to a complete stranger? Richard smiled sadly. He answers that. Want to hear? I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to. Vernon's voice returned, softer now, almost whispering. You ask why I chose you, James. The answer is simple, because you still have time. Because your children are still alive, your father still breathes, your chances are not over yet. Because when I looked in your eyes last night, I saw a man on the edge. One step forward meant redemption, one step back meant repeating my mistakes. And I can no longer change my story, James. But I can change yours. He coughed again. Use this money to become the man I should have been. Use this time to love the people I didn't love enough. And when your children grow up and look back, may they see a present father, not a fortune built on absences. That's the only thing that matters in the end. The only thing. The recording ended with a click. I sat there, trembling, while Richard organized the documents. $71 million. The chance to fix everything. The chance to save my relationship with my children, with my father. The chance to build something that truly mattered. But also the overwhelming weight of fulfilling the last wishes of a man I barely knew, of finding a lost granddaughter, of being the instrument of a redemption that wasn't mine. You need time to process, Richard said, not a question. But there's one thing I need you to know now. Vernon Coleridge was many things. Brilliant, stubborn, haunted by regrets. But he wasn't crazy. He thought through every detail of this. And he believed, with every fiber of his being, that you were the right person. How could he know? I asked, my voice broken. After 20 minutes. Richard closed the folder. Sometimes 20 minutes of truth is worth more than 20 years of pretense. He saw something in you, James. Something you may not even see yet. I left that office 2 hours later with documents I could barely comprehend, numbers that didn't make sense, and a weight on my chest that seemed heavier than any fortune could ease. I had 30 days to talk to my father. 2 years to prove I could be the father my children deserved. And an entire lifetime, apparently, to carry the legacy of a man who died giving me the chance he never had. On the sidewalk, I picked up my phone. My father's contact was there, waiting, as it always had been. Just a touch. Just a word. Just a piece of pride swallowed. But before I could decide, the phone rang. It was a local number. Hello. James Henley. A young, nervous female voice. My name is Elizabeth Thompson. My grandfather's lawyer just called me. He said you have something to tell me. The world stopped again. She already knew. Richard had called her. And now I would have to look into the eyes of Vernon's granddaughter and explain why her grandfather died without ever having the courage to meet her. Yes, I replied, closing my eyes. I have a lot to tell you. We arranged to meet at a cafe near the lawyer's office. I arrived 20 minutes early, sweating despite the air conditioning. How do you tell someone that her grandfather existed, loved her from afar, and died without the courage to meet her? How do you hand over tens of millions of dollars and explain that it comes loaded with regret and guilt? She arrived promptly at 2 in the afternoon. I recognized her immediately. She had Vernon's eyes, the same deep blue that had haunted me in the rearview mirror. But where Vernon carried weight and sorrow, she had determination. Brown hair tied in a simple ponytail, ordinary work clothes, a worn bag over her shoulder. She looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from working too much for too long. James, she asked, stopping in front of me. Elizabeth. Thank you for coming. We sat, and for a moment neither of us knew where to start. She broke the silence first. The lawyer told me my grandfather died yesterday. A grandfather I didn't even know existed until this morning. Her voice trembled slightly. He said you spent the last night with him. That he left you a fortune and left me a fortune too. None of this makes sense. I took a deep breath. I'll tell you everything from the beginning. But first, I need you to know one thing. Your grandfather made terrible mistakes. Mistakes he spent 37 years paying for. And in the end, all he wanted was to fix at least a piece of what he broke. I spent the next hour telling her everything. Last night's ride, the conversation about parents and children, the $30,000 tip, the cancer diagnosis, her father's death in 1988, the cruel way Vernon treated her mother when he discovered the pregnancy. Elizabeth cried when I told her about the letter her mother sent that Vernon tore up. She cried even more when I explained that he had spent the last 2 months knowing about her, having all the information to make contact, but paralyzed by shame. My mother told me about him before she died, she said when she could speak again. She said my father came from a rich family, that his grandfather would never accept her. She was never bitter about it, you know? Just sad. She said some wounds are too deep to heal. He left letters for you, I said softly, taking out the envelope Richard had given me. Years of letters he wrote, but never had the courage to send. And he left $18 million. He said it was always yours by right. She looked at the envelope as if it would burn her. I don't want his money. I wish I had a grandfather. I wish my mother had had a break, some help, anything when she was fighting cancer and couldn't pay the hospital bills. Where was that money when we really needed it? The anger in her voice was justified, deserved. You have every right to refuse, I replied. But I can tell you what he told me, that you can't change the past, but you can change the future. Not your grandfather's future, his is over. But the future of the people you can help with these resources. Elizabeth stayed silent for a long time, staring out the window. Finally, she took the envelope. I'll read the letters, she said. I don't know if I'll be able to forgive him, but I'll read them. When we left the cafe an hour later, we were not friends, but we were not enemies either. We were two people connected by a dead man, trying to understand what to do with the poison gift he had left. I went home that afternoon with my head spinning. 30 days to reconcile with my father. The countdown had already begun. I looked at the phone for the 100th time, but again I couldn't dial. Tomorrow, I promised myself. Tomorrow I would have the courage. My children were with me that weekend. When I picked them up at my ex-wife's house, she noticed something different on my face. Are you okay? She asked, suspicious. I am, I replied, and for the first time in years, it wasn't a lie. I will be. I spent the entire night with the kids. No phone, no TV, no distractions. We played board games that had been gathering dust in the closet. I cooked their favorite dinner, pancakes for dinner, because why not? My daughter laughed so hard she spilled juice on the carpet, and instead of getting mad, I laughed along with her. Dad, you're acting weird, my son said as I tucked him into bed. Weird how? Happy. You're happy. The words hit my chest like a hammer. When was the last time my kids saw me genuinely happy? When was the last time I was truly present, not just physically in the same room but mentally millions of miles away, worried about money, bills, and failures? I will be happy more often, I promised, kissing his forehead. A real promise this time. On Monday morning, I woke with a determination I hadn't felt in years. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed my father's number. It rang 3 times. 4. 5. Maybe he wouldn't answer. Maybe that was better. Hello. His voice was exactly as I remembered, rough, tired, cautious. Dad. It's me, James. Silence on the other end. Then James. I know we haven't spoken in a long time. I know the last words between us were terrible. But I need to tell you something. My voice was shaking, but I continued. You were right. I failed. The company failed, my marriage failed. I failed as a father and a son. You were right about everything. James. But being right didn't make you or me happier, Dad. It didn't bring us back. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life, or the rest of yours, carrying this anger. So I'm calling to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for disappointing you. I'm sorry for saying you were cold and distant. I'm sorry for cutting contact. And most of all, I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. The silence on the other end was so deep I thought he had hung up. Then I heard it, a sob. My father was crying. It wasn't your fault, he said, his voice breaking completely. It was me. I was too hard, too critical. You were going through the worst time of your life, and I kicked you while you were down. What kind of father does that? I think every day about what I said, wanting to call, but thinking you would never forgive me. Tears streamed down my face. I forgive you, Dad. And I need you to forgive me too. I already have, he whispered. I forgave a long time ago. We talked for 2 hours. We didn't fix everything. 37 years of pain don't disappear in one call. But we built a bridge where before there was only an abyss. We scheduled dinner for the next week. He wanted to see the grandchildren. I wanted him to meet the man I was trying to become. When we hung up, I felt 10 pounds lighter. 1 condition fulfilled. 3 to go. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Richard guided me through mountains of legal documents. The inheritance was being processed, accounts were being opened, audits were happening. I had money now, real money, but I couldn't just start spending it. There were plans to make, responsibilities to assume. The foundation was the hardest and most rewarding part. I rented a small office, hired 3 employees, and began structuring exactly how it would operate. The James Coleridge Second Chances Foundation would accept applications from small business owners who had failed. It didn't matter why they failed: poor management, bad luck, a poor economy. If they still had passion, still had the idea, still had the will to try again, we would provide capital, mentorship, and support. The first candidate I interviewed was a 42-year-old woman who lost her beauty salon after a complicated divorce. As she told her story, the mistakes she made, the shame she carried, the fear of trying again, I saw my own reflection. I saw Vernon. I saw all of us who failed and thought failure defined us forever. You deserve a second chance, I told her. And I'll help you build something even better this time. When she left the office an hour later with a check and a plan, she was crying with gratitude. But the one who should have been grateful was me. For the first time since losing my company, I felt that my experience, all that suffering, all that humiliation, had a purpose. It could be transformed into something that helped others. My nights and weekends were now sacred. Just me and my kids. I took my daughter to dance classes she had been begging for months. I helped my son build a science project on volcanoes that exploded all over the kitchen table, and instead of yelling about the mess, we laughed as we cleaned it together. My ex-wife noticed the change. I don't know what happened to you, she said one day while picking up the kids, but keep it up. They talk about you differently now. With real affection, not just obligation. 2 months after Vernon's death, Elizabeth called me. I read all the letters, she said, her voice soft. It took me weeks. Some I had to stop because it hurt too much. But I read them all. And he loved my father deeply. In a twisted, controlling way, but deeply. And I think he would have loved me too, if he had had the chance. She paused. I want to do something with the money. Something that honors my mother. She worked as a nurse her whole life, always caring for others while barely able to care for herself. I want to create a foundation that pays medical debts for low-income families. Especially cancer patients. My heart swelled. Vernon would be proud. I'm not doing it for him, she corrected firmly. I'm doing it for my mother. For the woman he should have supported and didn't. But if somehow that also honors his memory, then that's fine. We worked together over the following weeks, Elizabeth and I. 2 people connected by a ghost, building legacies he never built in life. She was brilliant, organized, passionate. And slowly, we began to become true friends. 6 months after receiving the inheritance, something extraordinary happened. I was helping my son with homework when my phone rang. It was Richard. James, there's something I need to show you. Can you come to the office tomorrow? What is it about? It's about Vernon. We discovered something among his personal belongings. Something that changes everything. My stomach churned. Changes how? Come tomorrow. You need to see it in person. I spent that night awake, imagining what it could be. More secrets? More revelations? More hidden conditions in the inheritance? When I arrived at the office the next day, Richard had an old shoebox on the table. This was in his personal safe, he explained. His assistant only discovered it yesterday while doing the final cleaning of his belongings. The safe had an instruction: open only if and when you had fulfilled all 4 conditions of the inheritance. But there are still 18 months left on the condition to be a present father, I argued. Technically, yes. But the investigators I hired have been sending weekly reports. You've exceeded all expectations, James. You sold your old car and bought a safer one for the kids. You're present at all school activities. Your children speak of you with genuine love. Your father has dinner at your house every week. The foundation has already helped 17 entrepreneurs. Elizabeth created the foundation in memory of her mother. He smiled. Vernon didn't need 2 years to know what kind of man you are. 6 months were enough. He pushed the box toward me. Open it. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside were old photos, a young Vernon holding a baby, clearly his son. Yellowed letters. And at the bottom, a thick envelope with my name written in Vernon's handwriting. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and another check. When I saw the amount, I nearly dropped it. $20 million. Read the letter, Richard said softly. I unfolded the paper and began to read through the tears already blurring my vision. James, if you are reading this, it means you have fulfilled all the conditions. It means you reconciled with your father, that you are present in your children's lives, that you built the foundation, and that you helped Elizabeth find her place in the family she never knew. It means you are the man I always wished to be but never had the courage to become. I had to stop reading, emotion choking me. Richard stayed silently on the other side of the table. There's something I didn't tell you that night in the car. Something that will completely change your understanding of why I chose you specifically. It wasn't just coincidence, James. It was much more than that. My heart started racing. In the last 2 months of my life, I hired the best private investigators in the country. Not just to find Elizabeth, but to find someone else. Someone who could be the instrument of my redemption. I gave them very specific criteria: a man between 30 and 40 years old, who had failed in business but not in character, who was estranged from his father due to conflicts, who had young children, and most importantly, who had my son's eyes. I froze. His son's eyes. They scoured records, social media, bankruptcy filings. They found dozens of candidates. But when I saw your photo, when I read your story, I knew immediately it was you. Because it wasn't just about the eyes or the age, James. It was about something I saw in every detail of your life. You were making exactly the same mistakes I made in the same order for the same reasons. My hand trembled holding the paper. Your company went bankrupt because you worked too hard trying to impress people who didn't matter while neglecting those who did. Exactly like I did. You distanced yourself from your father after a fight about your choices, exactly like my son distanced himself from me. You were losing your children one day at a time, exactly like I lost mine. It was like looking into a mirror of the past, seeing my own tragedy about to repeat in another life. Tears fell onto the letter, smudging some words. So I created a plan. I needed something that seemed like coincidence, that seemed like destiny. If I had just contacted you and offered the money, you would question it, refuse it, be suspicious. But if I entered your life as a regular passenger, if I shared my story genuinely, if I created a real connection before revealing anything about the inheritance, then you would understand it wasn't about the money. It was about salvation. My mind was exploding. Everything had been planned. The ride wasn't an accident. I asked my assistant to create an account on the rideshare app and specifically request you as the driver that night. I tracked your location through the app and timed it so you would be near my house. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would say it, when to reveal each part of my story. Even the $30,000 check was calculated, enough to make an impact but not so much that it would seem absurd to accept. I felt as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet. But then something unexpected happened. When you got in the car, when we started talking, I realized I didn't need to follow the script. Because the pain in your voice was real. The connection between us was genuine. Yes, I orchestrated the encounter, but what happened during that ride was completely authentic. Your empathy, your listening, the way you held back your own tears when I told you about my son, none of that can be fabricated. I took a deep breath, trying to process. And it was at that moment that I made the final decision. I went ahead with the plan. Because I discovered something crucial: you were not just a suitable candidate. You were the right person. The only person who could truly understand the weight of what I was leaving, and the only person who would use it to become better, not just richer. I turned the page with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The $20 million check in this envelope has no conditions. It's yours, unrestricted. Use it for your children, for your family, to expand the foundation, for whatever you want. But there is something more important here, a truth I discovered too late and need you to carry forward. I held my breath. I spent 37 years believing my greatest mistake was fighting with my son that day. That if I had only held my tongue, if I hadn't been so harsh, he would still be alive. But in the past months, talking with therapists, revisiting memories, I finally understood the truth. My greatest mistake wasn't that fight. It was every little choice I made in the 22 years before. Every family dinner I missed for business meetings. Every soccer game I didn't attend. Every time I put money above moments. The fight was just the culmination of 2 decades of absence. Sobs shook my body uncontrollably. You saved your children, James. You stopped the cycle before it was too late. And in doing so, you gave me something that no therapy, no fortune, no amount of regret could give: the peace of knowing that my suffering was not in vain. That through me, through my pain, at least one family was saved. At least one father woke up before losing everything that truly matters. I had to stop reading. The emotion was overwhelming. Richard discreetly pushed a box of tissues toward me. There's one last thing in the box. Something I've kept for 37 years, and that now belongs to you. I plunged my hand into the shoebox and felt cold metal. I pulled it out, and my heart stopped. It was a watch. An old wristwatch, beautifully preserved, with an inscription on the back: "For my son, may time always remind you of what truly matters. With love, Dad." I gave this watch to my son on his 21st birthday, the letter continued. It was the last thing I gave him before he died. The police returned it to me along with his other personal belongings. I've looked at this watch every day for the past 37 years, remembering that time is the only thing we cannot buy back, no matter how much fortune we have. I held the watch against my chest, feeling its weight, its meaning. Use this watch, James. And every time you look at it, remember, it's not about how many years you live. It's about how many moments you are truly present. Your father is alive. Your children are still young. You still have time. Use it wisely. The letter ended with one final line. Thank you for giving me the chance to fix at least one mistake. Thank you for letting me save you in the way I could never save my son. And thank you for proving that redemption, even when it comes late, is still worth it. With profound gratitude and hope, Vernon. I sat in that room for an hour, unable to move. Everything made sense now. The way Vernon looked at me that night. The specific questions. The connection I felt. It wasn't chance. It was a desperate man making the final play of his life to ensure his suffering had meaning. He used me, I whispered finally. He saved you, Richard gently corrected. And you saved him too, in a way. You gave him purpose in his last days. You gave him hope that his legacy wouldn't just be a fortune, but genuine transformation of life. Not many people achieve that. When I left that office, the watch was on my wrist. The $20 million check was in my pocket. But what weighed heaviest was the truth. I was not just a random beneficiary of a dying man's generosity. I was a carefully chosen project. An experiment in redemption. A substitute for the son he lost. And strangely, it didn't make me angry. It humbled me. Because Vernon was right. I was on the same path he was. Making the same mistakes. And if it weren't for that divine or calculated intervention, I would have ended up exactly where he did, rich in money, bankrupt in love. I called Elizabeth from the parking lot. You knew. I asked when she answered. About his plan? There was a pause. Richard told me this morning. No, I didn't know. My grandfather apparently researched you for weeks before that night. How do you feel about that? She sighed. Honestly? Relieved. Because it means it wasn't all a lie. He really cared, even if in a twisted, controlling way. He really wanted to fix things, even if he couldn't fix himself. I don't think I'll ever know if I should thank him or be furious at him. You can be both, she said softly. People are rarely just one thing. He was manipulative and genuine. Calculated and loving. Selfish in method, but altruistic in result. Just like all of us, I imagine. That night, I sat with my children in the living room. Vernon's watch on my wrist, his legacy on the table, his words echoing in my head. "Dad, can I see the watch?" my daughter asked, fascinated by the glow of the old metal. "You can," I said, taking it off my wrist and placing it in her small hands. "But you have to promise to take care of it. This watch is special." "Why?" "Because it reminds me of something very important. It reminds me to cherish every second with you. To never let work, money, or anything else steal the moments we have together." My son looked at me with those perceptive 12-year-old eyes. "Is it because of the man who died? The one who left you the money?" "Yes," I admitted. "He learned too late what really matters. And he gave me the chance to learn in time." "Do you think he's happy now?" my daughter asked, her voice soft and serious. The question caught me off guard. I looked at my children's faces, healthy, loved, truly present in my life in a way Vernon's son never had been. I thought of Elizabeth, finally learning her story. I thought of the foundation, helping people who needed second chances. I thought of my father, dining at my house every week, rebuilding the relationship we almost lost forever. "Yes," I replied, pulling both of them into a hug. "I think he's finally at peace." And in that moment, holding my children, feeling the weight of the watch beside me, knowing my father was alive and our relationship was healed, I fully understood Vernon's final gift. He didn't give me money. He gave me time. Time to fix mistakes before they became permanent. Time to be the father my children deserved. Time to build legacies that mattered. Time, the one thing no fortune can ever buy back. And for that, wherever Vernon was now, I was eternally grateful. A year and a half after Vernon's death, I was sitting in the foundation's office reviewing applications when my assistant came in with an envelope that looked official. "It came from Richard's office," he said. "Marked urgent." I opened it with curiosity. Inside was a formal invitation to a dedication ceremony. It took me a few seconds to process what I was reading. Vernon and James Coleridge Memorial, a garden of second chances. Elizabeth had created a memorial garden. On the land where Vernon's old house had stood, demolished after his death, she built a public space dedicated to the memory of her grandfather and the father she never knew. The invitation said the inauguration would take place in a week and that my presence was essential. When I arrived at the location on the appointed day, I was speechless. The garden was stunning, stone paths winding between colorful flower beds, benches strategically placed for contemplation, a central fountain with flowing water creating a gentle melody. But what really struck me was the entrance. 2 wrought iron gates, each with a plaque. The one on the left read, "In memory of James Coleridge, who left this world too soon." The one on the right, "In memory of Vernon Coleridge, who finally found his way back home." Elizabeth was waiting near the fountain, wearing a simple but elegant dress. Next to her was a man in his 40s I didn't recognize. "James," she greeted me with a hug. "Thank you for coming. I want to introduce someone." She turned to the man beside her. "This is Thomas. My half-brother." My jaw dropped. Half-brother. Thomas extended his hand, smiling nervously. "We discovered each other 3 months ago. My mother had a brief affair with Elizabeth's father in the 80s, shortly before he met her mother. She never told him about me, just like Elizabeth's mother never did. Apparently, our father had a habit of leaving secret children out there without knowing." Elizabeth laughed, but there was sadness in her eyes. When the news about Vernon's inheritance spread through the media, Thomas saw my father's name and became curious. He did a DNA test, and we discovered we're siblings. Another layer of secrets and regrets in the Coleridge family. "Did Vernon know about you?" I asked Thomas. "No. But now it makes sense why he was so obsessed with the idea of second chances and reconciliation. How many other mistakes did he make that we never discovered? How many other lives were affected by his choices?" The inauguration ceremony was small but deeply meaningful. Elizabeth gave a speech about forgiveness and legacies. Thomas spoke about how discovering a family he never knew gave him a sense of belonging he had always missed. When it was my turn to speak, I looked at the dozens of people gathered, foundation beneficiaries, staff, my father, my children, friends who had supported my journey, and felt the full weight of what Vernon had started. "A year and a half ago," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "I was a broken man. Financially, emotionally, spiritually. I was losing everything that mattered while clinging to pride and anger. Then a stranger got into my car on a rainy night and changed everything. I looked at the gate with Vernon's name. He manipulated me, that's true. Orchestrated our meeting, planned every word, calculated every move. But do you know what I discovered? Sometimes we need to be manipulated out of our own self-destruction. Sometimes someone needs to force us to face truths we've been avoiding for years. And sometimes the greatest generosity comes wrapped in imperfect methods." My daughter smiled at me from the front row, holding her grandfather's hand. My father, who I now saw regularly, who had dinner with us every week, who finally had the relationship with his grandchildren he had always wanted. Vernon Coldridge was not a saint. He made terrible mistakes. Hurt people deeply. But in the end, when faced with his own mortality, he made a choice. He could have taken his fortune and regrets to the grave, leaving only ashes. Instead, he transformed his pain into purpose. Turned his mistakes into lessons. And in the process, he didn't just change my life, he gave me back my life. I took the watch from my wrist and held it high for everyone to see. This watch belonged to his son. Vernon carried it for 37 years as a reminder of everything he lost. Now I carry it as a reminder of everything I almost lost but managed to save in time. And when my children are grown, I will pass this watch to them with the same message Vernon gave me. Time is the only resource that cannot be recovered. Use it wisely. Use it with love. Use it while you still can. There was applause, but also tears. Because everyone there understood. Everyone had their own versions of wasted time, missed opportunities, unspoken words. After the ceremony, my father approached. Now 73, he seemed lighter than I remembered in decades. As if reconciling with me had removed a burden he had carried for a long time. "I'm proud of you, son," he said, placing his hand on my shoulder. "Of the man you've become. The father you are. Of everything." "I wouldn't have made it without Vernon," I admitted. "Without the shock he gave me." "Perhaps," my father agreed. "But he could only do that because he saw something in you worth saving. The seed was already there, James. He just watered it." I spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the garden with my children. My daughter, now 10, read each informational plaque about the plants with curiosity. My son, 13, was more interested in the fountain, tossing coins and making wishes. "Dad, what would you wish for if you threw a coin?" he asked. "I wouldn't need to wish for anything," I replied honestly. "I already have everything that matters." He rolled his eyes like teenagers do. "That's so cheesy." "It's true anyway." Elizabeth caught up with us with Thomas. They had spent the past months getting to know each other, filling in the gaps of lives lived separately. It wasn't easy, there was resentment, confusion, all the baggage that comes with discovering family late. But they were trying, and that was what mattered. "Your mother's health foundation is helping so many people," I remarked to Elizabeth. I saw the monthly report. Over 200 families had medical debts forgiven. "It's rewarding," she replied, "but also painful. Every family we help reminds me of how my mother could have been helped. How Vernon had the resources to make a difference and chose not to." "But you're doing it now," Thomas said gently. "That counts." "It counts," she agreed. "But it doesn't undo the past." "Nothing undoes the past," I said. "We can only change what we do with the future." As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, I looked around the garden. Families wandered the paths. Couples sat on benches, talking quietly. Children ran among the flowers, laughing. This place, born from tragedy, guilt, and regret, had become something beautiful. Something alive. That's how true legacies work, I realized. They aren't just the money we leave or the buildings we construct. They are the lives we touch, the changes we inspire, the chains of kindness we start that continue long after we are gone. Vernon started a chain that rainy night. And now it extended through hundreds of lives. The 17 entrepreneurs the foundation helped, who in turn employed people and served their communities. The 200 families Elizabeth relieved from crushing medical debt. My children, growing up with a present father. My restored relationship with my own father, Thomas, finding family. And countless others who would be touched in the years to come. 3 months after the garden inauguration, I received an unexpected call. It was a woman named Patricia, 68 years old. "You don't know me," she began, her voice hesitant, "but I knew Vernon a long time ago. We were friends in college, before he became who he became. I lost touch with him for decades, but recently learned his story, yours, everything. And I need to tell you something Vernon never knew." My stomach tightened. More secrets? "Vernon helped me when I needed it most," she continued. "I was pregnant, single, broke. It was 1973. He lent me money for medical expenses, never asked for it back. Said everyone deserves a chance to care for those they love. That money allowed me to have my daughter safely, to raise her right. She's a doctor now, saving lives every day." Tears began forming in my eyes. I always wanted to thank him, but when I became financially stable and tried to find him, he was already a big businessman, unreachable for people like me. So I kept the gratitude in my heart. But when I heard his story, how he thought he only caused pain, I needed someone to know. Vernon Coleridge saved my life and my daughter's. He was kind when he didn't have to be. Generous when he could have been indifferent. I hung up the call with a heart both heavy and light. Heavy because Vernon died thinking his life was only a series of failures. Light because now I knew the truth. He had touched more lives positively than he ever imagined. His mistakes were enormous, but so were his acts of kindness. And maybe that's what defines a human life, not the absence of mistakes, but the presence of genuine attempts to do better. Now, 2 years after that rainy night, I wake up every morning and the first thing I do is look at Vernon's watch on my nightstand. Then I go to my children's room, wake them with kisses on their foreheads, and make breakfast for the 3 of us. I take them to school myself. I spend the afternoons working at the foundation, changing lives the way Vernon changed mine. I have dinner with my father twice a week. And on Friday nights, without exception, it's family night. No phones, no work, just the 3 of us creating memories my children will carry forever. Vernon's fortune gave me financial freedom. But his true gift was forcing me to confront the truth we all avoid. We are all one day, one argument, one accident away from losing everything that truly matters. And when that happens, no amount of money can bring back lost time, unspoken words, or missed hugs. Elizabeth and Thomas now run both foundations together. They aren't just siblings, but partners in honoring a complicated legacy and transforming it into something pure. My father jokes that he now has 3 grandchildren, my 2 children and the foundation, which he treats with the same paternal pride. As for me, I still drive sometimes. Not because I need to, but because that night in the car was where everything changed, and I never want to forget where I came from. But now, when a passenger gets in, I truly listen. Truly see. Because I've learned that every person carries stories, every encounter has potential for meaning, and sometimes a simple act of genuine presence can change lives. Last week, I picked up a passenger around 50 years old who cried throughout the ride. I learned she had just lost her job, was going through a divorce, and hadn't spoken to her adult daughter in 3 years over a petty fight. When we arrived at her destination, I handed her a foundation card. "If you need help restarting professionally, we're here," I said. "But may I offer unsolicited advice?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Call your daughter today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Apologize, forgive, rebuild that bridge. Because one day, sooner than you think, one of you won't be here anymore. And all that will remain is the 3 years of silence and the pain of knowing it could have been different." She looked at me with wide eyes. "How do you know?" "Someone once gave me the same advice," I replied, touching the watch on my wrist. "It saved my life. Maybe it will save yours too." As she left the car, I saw her pick up the phone. And I knew, with the same certainty Vernon must have felt that night, that I had just planted a seed. Maybe it would grow, maybe not. But I had tried. I had passed on the gift I had received. That's how redemption works, I realized. It's not a single dramatic event. It's an endless chain of small choices, small acts of kindness, small moments of real presence that accumulate until, suddenly, you look back and realize, you are no longer who you were. You have become someone better. Vernon Coleridge was not perfect. But he taught me something no school, no book, no fortune could teach. It's never too late to try to be better. Never too late to make a difference. And never, ever too late to choose love over pride, presence over absence, time over money. His will did not break my heart, it fixed it. And now I spend each day trying to fix other hearts the same way. Because in the end, that's all that matters. Not how much we accumulate, but how much we share. Not how many years we live, but how many moments we truly inhabit. Not what we leave behind when we go, but who we help become better while we're still here. Thank you, Vernon. For choosing me. For saving me. For teaching me that second chances aren't just possible, they're what make life worth living. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And more importantly, call that person who's waiting for your call. Fix that broken relationship. Hug your children today, not tomorrow. Because time, as Vernon taught me, is the only gift that cannot be refunded once spent. Use it wisely. Use it with love. Use it while you still can.